Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the VMblog Expert Interview series. And today we're joined by Andy Fernandez, the Senior Director of Product Marketing at HYCU. Andy, we were just talking about it. This is the first time you and I have done a video together. So welcome, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, David. I'm excited.
To jump right in, I know recently HYCU just, announced a new State of SaaS Resilience in 2024 report, and it covers a lot, covers the state of SaaS data protection. Can you talk a little bit about, why HYCU is put this report out?
Yeah, absolutely. And David, essentially, this came from two separate scenarios. One of them is we simply observe our customers. How are our customers consuming technology? How are they provisioning new technologies? Now, I'm not talking about just customer-facing applications, but also business systems. And I don't think I have to mention all of the emphasis that is currently in the media around third-party risk, whether it's due to supply chain incidents, cyber attacks. We start to really understand that every single organization that is leveraging any type of cloud and SaaS technology has to think about what is the potential risk and how do we make sure that organization is resilient. The other component here too is we've just observed our customers' journey from where we started, where folks were just had a castle. They had a data center they could see, they could manage, they could touch, they could guard their applications that were all server. But now what we're seeing is we live in a world where the majority of new workloads are cloud native workloads. And so what we really wanted to understand was, what is the scope of the challenge today? How many applications are organizations really using in the cloud? Do IT organizations really understand what they're using, therefore what their risk profile is, and really understand, okay, do IT leaders, do organizations really have a grasp on this? Do they understand exactly how to protect themselves and how to still maximize all of the value of the cloud? And that, David, is where the State of SaaS Resilience report came out.
Now, I'm a geek for surveys and for any kind of data like that. Can you maybe, talk about some of the findings of the report that jump out at you? Anything stand out, or did any of the findings from the report surprise you?
Many of the findings surprised me. Actually, our entire team. We've been talking about this report for a while now. And just before I mention this, one of the things that we set out to do was this is not an survey to our customer base. This is an objective use of a third party where we made sure to survey IT leaders in the US, in Europe, in Asia, all over the world at various points of responsibilities from CIO to IT leader or IT manager and administrator. We really wanted to get a good sample and really an understanding of the folks who are actually in the front lines of every single organization. And from that, we found some very, very interesting things. The first thing that we noticed was simply an understanding of when you ask an IT leader, when you ask somebody in the IT organization, how many SaaS applications they're actually using, what we found was a massive gap in understanding of what do I think as a person in IT that we're using from a SaaS perspective versus what is the organization actually using. So in this survey, when we found what is the average amount of applications that you're using that are SaaS or cloud services, they said that it was 22. Now, if you go look at any organization, even smaller organizations, technology companies, and startups, take a look at HYCU, for example, a couple hundred employees. David, we're using more than 70 SaaS applications ourselves, right? Because when we think SaaS, you think it's not just Microsoft 365. It's not just Salesforce. It's your Git repository, what you're using for CI/CD. Are you running on cloud infrastructure? Are you using services within that? What's HR? What's finance using? So when we took a look at that, and when you look at other surveys with thousands of organizations in their sample, the reality was that the average organization has over 200 SaaS applications. So I think one of the most shocking areas here was IT thinks that they own the majority of the applications that are in the organization. And they have a very, very limited understanding of the threat surface, of their risk profile, but also an understanding of their responsibility, because it's not 22, it's actually 10x. And I'd say, David, that's probably one of the most surprising things in the sense of how drastic this change was. But it's very easy to understand that, right? When you're in IT, you are used to managing everything as server or a data center right? Whether it was SharePoint server, whether it was your IAM, whether it was your CRM, you used to manage that on-prem. All of a sudden, people with a credit card can spin up a new application and you'll never find out about it. So clearly that's something that is still going on and very, very important for organizations to identify.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think just me all by myself, I use way more than 22
Yeah.
SaaS applications. So that would have surprised me as well.
I'd say, David, the production of this video probably requires 3 or 4 SaaS applications.
Yeah, exactly. Well, keeping on that topic of SaaS, what are what are some of the challenges that SaaS creates for these organizations? You talked about how they didn't even know half the time which applications that they had, and people can easily spin it up with the credit card. Talk about some of the challenges there.
Yeah, David, there's a couple, and I'll share some of more insights from the report as I answer this, because it's exactly around this. The challenge, the first thing is that organizations, of course, may not have full visibility of all the applications that they're using. So if I'm an IT leader, yes, we have effectively leveraged our IDPs. People are using SSO, they're using MFA, but that doesn't mean that I'm fully keeping track of everything that's in my directory. Nor do I understand the business context of why I'm using an application like Monday.com or this new thing called Notion. All of a sudden, it's hosting critical customer information, but I simply wasn't aware of its use. I wasn't aware of why it was being used in the organization. Now, that's the very basic challenge of you simply cannot protect what you can't see. But then it comes to the fact that what we found was that most organizations didn't understand their responsibility when it came to cloud. And it's easy to understand and put yourself in their perspective. I used to manage these applications on-prem in my castle that I could build a moat around. I had my networking, I had my firewall, I had my network access. Anyone who had to get to my Jira, to my SharePoint server, had to get through our organization. But all of a sudden, I never have to patch that anymore. I'm paying somebody else to host it for me. They're responsible for high availability. I no longer have to worry about Patch Tuesday when it comes to my business SaaS applications. And when you let that responsibility go, it's very easy to let go other critical responsibilities like data protection. And what we found in the survey was that nearly half, so 41% of the folks surveyed, thought that the cloud provider bared responsibility in case there was any incident. So let's say that somebody deletes the data, they believe that the cloud provider was responsible for recovering that data for them. This right here is the biggest area of risk. And the reason I say that is it's an easily avoidable one, because SaaS applications are incredible. They bring extremely hyper-specific capabilities that solve our problems every single day. We don't have to manage them on-prem. We don't have to depreciate hardware anymore. We can start using it whenever we want. But we have to use it extremely responsibly. And so when you think about some of the pitfalls and some of the dangers here not bearing responsibility or having an awareness of that, is the fact that SaaS and cloud is, applications and data sitting in somebody else's hardware. And when you're thinking about what's happened recently or in any other organization, you have incidents all the time where the ISV or the vendor can accidentally delete something. They can make a mistake. We've seen that in the public cloud. We've seen that in other areas. And all of a sudden, that person has no copy of their data. And they better hope that they had potentially a copy somewhere else or something happened, but they are at the mercy of the vendor in that scenario. Then comes what I would call the tenant level responsibilities. The way I like to explain this, David, is potentially we have a parking garage. What do you expect from a parking garage? You expect that I can take my car, that I can use the service for a couple hours, that the lights are on, that I'm safe, that my car will be there when I come back. And that's it. Now, what happens if I leave my window open in the car and someone steals my laptop, or somebody scratches the car or hits me and I don't have insurance? The garage bears no responsibility for that. They simply can't. It's not feasible. SaaS and cloud applications are the same thing, in the sense that if I delete something myself, there's no way for the SaaS vendor to truly be able to service that. And in fact, they show explicitly in the shared responsibility model, and they say, look, we'll keep the system available. There's an outage, we will recover. But if you delete something, you corrupt information, if you have an insider threat, that's on you. So imagine, David, now that you are an IT leader. First, you have a misperception of the total amount of applications that you're using and a misperception of their criticality. And then many of them are assuming that they don't have any responsibility. So the only time they really find out about this risk is already when something bad happens, when there's a deletion, when there's a supply chain incident, when there's a ransomware attack. And to us, this kind of iceberg of risk, of third-party risk, is one of the most dangerous areas that we live in today, because we are truly in a supply chain software world where everything is connected. Therefore, everything is configurable or corruptible.
Now, outside of all the challenges that you talked about, thinking, looking at the report, were there any other key learnings that you found that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we found as well was how critical the world of identity access management has become. So, and think of it this way, right? When you're on-prem, you're simply managing your network, your data center, and everything around it. It's a very, very straightforward use case. But now in this world where I can spin up application at any point in time, and one of the things that was very critical that we found here, David, as well, was that although SaaS applications are underestimated, in our survey, we found out that they were the number one source of a breach. The number one source of a breach. And that just shows you one of the examples of third-party risks that you face if you're not effectively protecting your data yourself. And what we found here was not only was that SaaS was the number one source, but that organizations often found that if there was any type of compromising or their configurations of their data in their IAM was compromised, that the organization would be in a very, very bad place. In fact, in one of the survey results, we found that 75% of these businesses would be meaningfully impacted if the data and configurations in their identity access management service was gone. So this is one of the core findings here was SaaS applications are an easy target. They're a very easy target. When you think about if somebody in sales or in HR or marketing simply paid for it with a credit card, added customer information, and left their password as password. And that is a very clear, easy, low effort, high ROI activity for a cyber criminal or a cyber criminal group. And that is really what we found. People don't know how many applications they're really using. They underestimate the responsibility that the vendor will take over. And then they don't realize that those applications themselves are the number one target in the threat.
Now, with all that newfound information from the survey report, what can organizations do now?
There's a very simple approach here. One, David, is making sure that you first discover and understand how many of these applications you're actually using. If you don't know what the organization's using, then you have no understanding of how to protect it. So the first thing is look beyond IT. What's engineering doing? Give me an idea of your system architecture. What is your workflow? How do you develop? How do you test? How do you create activities? What are the services that you're using? Just there, you're going to find 7 to 15 different services, from Terraform to Circle CI to all of these other applications that are critical. Then move on over and take a look at your service catalog. Talk to sales, talk to marketing, look at your directory within the IDP that you're using, and you're going to see a very clear picture so that you can start triaging what are the applications that I need to worry about. The other piece that once you know what you're dealing with, you then have to make sure that you always have a safe copy of the data available to you. Because here's a reality, David, these services, these cloud services are amazing and you want to continue using it. They bring value. And the best way to be able to protect yourself, because this is not your network, this is not your infrastructure, this is somebody else's infrastructure, is to always simply have a safe copy of that data that you can recover from. And I don't mean keeping a copy inside of the service that you're using, whether it's a recycle bin, because if that service goes down, so does your recycle bin. What you need to be able to have is always a clean off-site copy of that data somewhere outside of that service for all of the applications that you're using. And I think this sounds very familiar to everybody's listening, and to you, David. You're an industry veteran. The 3-2-1 rule. We're back at it again. And with innovation, sometimes we forget about the fundamentals of security and data protection. Just having a safe copy outside of your service always guarantees that when it's back up, that when somebody makes a mistake, whether it was you or the vendor, that you can just restore versus having to rebuild everything from scratch. And that is something that every single, from CISO to administrator to admin of an application, should think about. Do I always have a safe copy of that data? outside of the service that I'm using.
Now you've set the stage really well. Could you, respond to that now? Talk about, where HYCU fits in and how they help.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of our life mission here at HYCU, is to solve this problem of third-party risk of data silos. And this is something that we've observed from our own customers. And we followed their journeys. And where their journeys were explicitly on-prem, we make sure to deliver purpose-built backup for Nutanix, for VMware, for file shares. But as we noticed, our customers were migrating to the cloud. We're using all these SaaS applications. So we had to make sure that that same level of maturity, that enterprise class protection, the fundamentals of data protection were also followed. But what we found, though, David, was that there are 30,000 SaaS applications. And during this conversation, someone started a new one, right? And so how do you, as a data protection vendor, scale to meet the needs of so many different applications all over the world? And that is where we released last year at the beginning the rCloud development platform, where we essentially decentralize the ability to deliver purpose-built enterprise backup and recovery for every application, where the ISVs themselves can come in, build and release in the HYCU marketplace purpose-built backup and recovery, with always having access to offsite copies. And that is our approach, David, where now, from last year, we protect over 80 integrations in our marketplace. This means anything from Jira on cloud to GitHub to Salesforce to Notion, but also still the fundamentals: Nutanix, VMware, AWS infrastructure, Google Cloud Services, and Azure as well, all together with one vendor to unify that. But one of my favorite things that we're doing, David, is not only saying, when you figure out the issue, here is the data protection platform with the most integrations for you to solve third-party risk, but we also, within the platform, release a free service called rGraph. And using that same IDP, using Okta or using Entra ID, we actually fully visualize all of the applications that are in your directory. And we can tell you and paint a picture of your organization by department and expose the applications that don't even have any native data protection capabilities. So that you can go to engineering and say, did you know that this Git repository that you have, that you depend on, that your source code, your configurations and IP lives in, doesn't have any native recovery capabilities, and you're responsible for it? This gives and paints the picture for organizations to triage their risk. And from HYCU's perspective, our entire life mission is to make sure that you can see those applications, understand the risk, make sure that you can automatically back them up without spending your entire life as a backup admin, simply adding an autopilot backup, and always knowing that you can restore your copies from an offsite location that are only in the customer storage as well. That's our philosophy here, David. The only way to address third-party risk is to understand it, to protect it, and to always have a copy of it available.
Now, I've had the pleasure of speaking with different members of your team and Simon and others from HYCU throughout the year. And, I've told that I'm amazed at the speed with which you guys are advancing the product and everything that you're putting in it. So I don't want to put you on the spot or get you into any trouble with HYCU, but I'm going to ask anyway. Here we are. We're into the second half of the year. What do you see is next for HYCU as we get through the rest of 2024 and head into 2025?
David, what you're going to see, without getting in trouble, and Simon always does a much better job of this than I do, is you're going to see a continued support for critical services. As you know, we've been able to protect Okta for workforce identity, for customer identity. We will be protecting and releasing the same thing for other major IDP providers as well. But we also are going to continue our mission of protecting cloud services, not just your compute, your database, and your storage, but all of your configurations, and continue releasing the backup and recovery of critical applications across the entire organization. David, so one thing that you'll notice when you go to our cloud, in our marketplace, you can actually request that HYCU builds or reaches out to an ISV to build backup and recovery for your application. So every day we're getting pinged with all these different applications that some I've never even heard of. but these customers truly rely on them for customer or business systems. And what we're doing is making sure that we fully democratize that. So what you'll see from HYCU is continually serve our mission, where we said last year, we are going to protect the world from third-party risk. We're going to eliminate data silos from a backup perspective. That's what we're doing, and we're going to continue serving our customers. You'll even see applications that you might not even think of. I'll give you an example. Something that we released a few months ago was protection for Pinecone. Vector databases, LLMs, they're huge. Well, the vector database is at the heart of that, but it's still a database. Somebody can delete data. It can be corrupted. It can be hacked. The model can degrade. But we're so excited with these new use cases that we forget about the fundamentals. So these are the types of things that we're protecting that the legacy backup world cannot afford to do because they're not architected to do so.
Well, Andy, this has been great. A lot of really good information. And I want to thank you again for joining VMblog today. But before I let you go, I want to make sure two things. One, I want to put I'll put a link in the show notes so folks can get a hold of the report and view some of that stuff for themselves. But where else should they go if they want to learn more about HYCU, some of the things that you talked about today on the video?
Obviously, reading the report, also even checking out the report that we published where Gartner has in the Magic Quadrant for Enterprise Backup and Recovery named HYCU as a visionary as well. So these are areas, but at the end of the day, if you have questions about HYCU, simply go to hycu.com and you will be able to talk to anybody within a few minutes or access any information that you need.
Great. Well, thanks again, Andy. Really appreciate it. And it was great to speak with you.
Thanks, David.
All right.